Welcome to the podcast, Take a Deep Breath with Us. I'm your host, Dr. Ginnelle Ries. After being a physician for many years, I felt it was important to spread the message that this life is not the end and miracles do happen. I spread this message of hope not only by sharing my own stories, but those of my guests, who share their incredible stories of such things as angelic encounters, near-death experiences, miraculous healings, and unexplained spiritual events. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this episode of Take a Deep Breath with Us. I'm your host, Dr. Ginnelle Ries. I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Mary Kanatzar-Glaser. Mary and I have actually been friends for 38 years, but she has an incredible story that I am very excited for her to share today. In 2009, Mary had the idyllic life. You were married, mother of 3 school-age children. You were a successful real estate agent and very driven, if I remember. And out of the blue, you became very suddenly and gravely ill, really to the point that you were on the brink of death. And you had an incredible, miraculous, complete recovery and healing. And Mary attributes that to many things. One of the main things is a gift that your grandmother, so to speak, gave to you, and we'll hear more about that, as well as a special rosary that was given to your family and you, and then also special prayers that were being lifted up for you. So, and it's an incredible story. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Ginnelle. I'm so happy to be here today.
Yeah, so I'm so excited for you to tell this story. So let's start with, why don't you start with what happened? I mean, here you were healthy. You really had no medical problems. Life is going on as it should with your family and you. And all of a sudden, you became very, very sick. So tell us about that. How did it start?
Yes.
What kind of symptoms did you have? And what happened?
Yes. So it was January 12th. And I was a mother of 3 young children, as you mentioned. I had a 6th grader, a 3rd grader, and a 1st grader. So I was extremely busy and running them to all their basketball games, sporting events, dance competitions, etc. And on January 12th, I came down with what I thought was basically the stomach flu. I became very sick. I had just very sick to the stomach and a high fever. Some people in my family had the flu, and so I just expected that it was the flu. By the next morning when I woke up, though, I really couldn't get out of bed. And so my family knew that there was something a little off. That was strange. No matter if I was sick, I would still get out of bed, get the kids off to school or what have you, and I just couldn't function. So my husband stayed home from work. And then my symptoms just continued to deteriorate. I really couldn't get out of bed. They panicked and called our family physician, and he said to kind of wait, see if I probably needed some fluids. But by the next morning on the 13th, they rushed me to the ER so I could get some fluids. And at that time, my blood pressure, when I went in, it was very cold. I had gloves on. I took my gloves off to the triage nurse, and she saw that my fingertips were blue. And at that point, she took a deep breath and said, "This is much worse than the flu." And they just rushed me back to the big emergency room. My blood pressure was plummeted. I think it was 40/80 or something. And it was within the hour, they knew I was in multi-system organ failure.
And I remember when you've told me this story before, that, which I always remember, you said that on the way to the hospital or as you got to the emergency room that you knew something was really wrong because all of a sudden you could no longer see color.
Correct.
That you could only see things in black and white.
Right.
Which I'm a physician. I've been a physician for 30 years, and I've never heard someone who's in what we call septic shock, describe that. So that's kind of, a different sort of symptom to hear. So that was probably very frightening. I can't even imagine.
It was very frightening, and I attribute a lot of the emergency room physician was very kind and reassuring. And he whispered to me, he was not supposed to be at the hospital. He was usually at a much larger hospital. I went to a small suburban hospital, and he's usually at the larger hospital, but for some reason he was there that day. So he was more skilled perhaps and knew what was going on. But he just whispered in my ear, and he just said, you're going to continue to fight, and, we're going to walk through this, and you're going to walk out of the hospital. And then pretty much everything just started going very quickly. After that, I would hear my family come into the room, and I would hear them go, they just couldn't believe how I appeared. And I know you saw me at that time.
Right. So, and I have a little part of this story, so I'll just kind of explain. So you actually had been in the ICU for 5 days when I got a call from a friend, a mutual friend of ours, and her name was Carol. And I'll never forget it. Those moments you don't forget. I was sitting in my office. It was a Sunday night. It was, later, and I was studying actually for some training I was doing. And Carol called, and she said, "Ginnelle, you aren't going to believe this." I didn't even know, Carol nor I knew you were even at in the hospital at the time. I think your family just kept thinking, well, you would turn around and this would get better, and it would be fine. Why worry people? So, but Carol called, and she said, "Ginnelle, you aren't going to believe this, but Mary is very, very sick. She's on life support." And I got a call from her sister, and she said they don't think she's going to survive. And I just remember I was in such shock, and I hung up, and I sat there for a couple minutes, and I have a little St. Joseph candle. So I lit the candle, and I started praying. And the story really is your story, but here I'm going to go ahead and tell this part, but because it is, I think, part of what I think happened. But so I lit the candle and just started saying a prayer, and all of a sudden, and probably it's only the second time in my life that I received such a strong calling, or what I would call calling or message, but it was, you need to take your rosary from Medjugorje and bring it up to Mary's family. So, and I probably should digress a little bit and explain what Medjugorje is and the rosary. So Medjugorje is a place in former Yugoslavia. It's in Croatia, where the Virgin Mary has been appearing to visionaries since the 1980s. And I did a pilgrimage to this religious site in the year 2000. And what was really neat is that our guide, we stayed at one of the visionaries' homes. So the guide took any items that we either brought that were religious or items that we purchased while we were there, and took them and gave them to one of the visionaries who actually had, one of her visions of the Virgin Mary during that week that we were there. And the visionary put the items in the room with her and asked the Virgin Mary to bless those items. So as you can imagine, those were extremely special to us. And that was in the year 2000. We brought those back. And almost immediately, another gal that was on the pilgrimage with me gave one of her rosaries to a young boy who had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. And she gave the rosary to the family, and she said, "It's a special rosary. It's been blessed by the Virgin Mary herself, and I want to give this to you." Well, the family took the rosary. They would put it on the young boy. He was scheduled for surgery to remove his brain tumor. They would pray that rosary, holding him. And the morning of a surgery, they went and did a scan right before the young boy went into the operating room, and the tumor was gone. So that was the first miraculous, occurrence that happened with one of those rosaries. Well, and I would share that story. Well, as soon as people started hearing that, I would be asked if I had one of those rosaries that I could give them, or I felt called to give one to someone who was in desperate need. So I had only purchased one for each of my children, 4 children, and my husband and myself. But from 2000 to 2009, I had given every rosary away to people who were in desperate need of that. So I had one rosary left. So here I am studying, and I got this call, and I just, like I said, there was extremely strong message or calling. You need to go give this family this rosary. And I was like, first of all, it's my last one. You're a really good friend, but it was my last one. But then also, I'm like, okay, Mary, you at the time, they told me you were comatose on life support. I'm like, Mary won't know I'm there, So I don't know her family. I was anxious because I thought, am I going to run into your family? And here they're probably grieving over how sick you are, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And so I was hoping I could just run up there, hand the rosary to the nurse, and leave. But God had another plan. So I went up there and I walked into the ICU because I was going to leave some drinks and snacks for your family with a little note on it. But lo and behold, your whole family was there, of course, because you're a wonderful family. So it was your mom, your dad, your sister, one of your brothers, your aunt. We're all sitting there. And as soon as I walked in, your mom just stood up, Ginnelle, and she was so wonderful. And I didn't know her very well, but she came right over to me, gave me a hug. Thank you so much for coming, And she said, I'm so glad you're here. And that just made me feel so wonderful. And she said, will you look at Mary's lab work and tell me what you think? And I said, sure, of course, So she brought all the lab work to me, and I looked at it, and it was like somebody hit me in the stomach, because I realized that you were close to death. I mean, all your organs were failing, and your family had told me this. You were on dialysis. Your lungs were completely whited out. You were in what we call ARDS, which is complete lung failure. Kidneys were failing. Your liver, based on your lab work, was in tough shape. And I knew at that moment that you were close to death. Your blood pressure was so low that you were on multiple medications that artificially keep your blood pressure elevated. So I just looked at that, and my heart literally sank. And then your mom said, will you come take a look at Mary, and then you can give us an idea of what you think? And then, so I said, sure. And so we went.
That had to be so hard for you.
Yeah, it was because, you see somebody who's always so healthy, and then it's your friend. And I see sick people all day long, every day, but it's so completely different when it's somebody you love, right?
Right.
And so I walked into the ICU, and I just was taken aback. In septic shock, they have to give you all kinds of fluids to keep your blood pressure up, and then also all these medications. But you were swollen to probably twice your normal size. I mean, you were on life support. It was very shocking to see you that way, of course. And, we just kind of looked at you, and your mom was kind of telling me about what was going on and so forth. And I said, okay. And as we're walking back to the ICU, again, here, against my medical judgment, this message came very strong, and it said, you need to give this family the rosary, and you need to give them hope and tell them the miraculous stories that which have occurred in my life. And also I had examples. I don't know where it came from that night, but it was every example of a miraculous story or spiritual healing I had heard of. And we sat down, and for about 2 hours, I'm not sure I shut up. And I mean, I gave them the rosary and told them why it was special. And then it just came out of me. I mean, it's one of those things where
it was very comforting to my family. I know. Well, so comforting.
And it's one of those, I guess, God incidences, or I felt like it was the Spirit speaking through me, I guess is what I'm saying, because I don't know where it all came from. Normally I'm kind of a shy person, and it was just one story after the other. And instead of your family, which I thought, oh my God, they're going to think I'm crazy. No, they were all just sitting on the edge of their chairs, listening to every word I said. And then after I was done, your mom said, Ginnelle, I have to tell you about Mary's Miraculous Medal. So that is a very neat story. So tell us about that and your miraculous medal and your grandmother and that special gift that your grandmother really gave to a lot of people all over.
Yes. So previous to this, my grandmother was in her 90s and she had a wonderful life. But she had a little spell where she was in the hospital and she was near death. And my sister had attended a wedding at the church where my grandparents raised their whole family, which was also just special. And the gift from the bride to all of the guests was a miraculous medal with the story about St. Catherine Labouré and the miraculous medal and its healing powers. And so she had just received that, and we were going to the hospital to visit my grandmother. And my sister thought one of the gifts of the miraculous medal is the gift of a happy death. My grandmother was in her 90s. She'd had a wonderful life. We knew she was approaching the end of her life. And so it has more power when it's worn around the neck, so according to St. Catherine Labouré. And so we put that on my grandmother, and she miraculously got better and was able to return home, and she had a wonderful, happy death. We were all called to be around her, and we were all encircled around her bed and praying as she left the earth, very comfortable and happy with her family. And so it was her wish that we would give the medal to people who were in need. And so our family bought a lot of medals, and like your rosary, people started hearing about this, and we would send the medal, or if we heard of somebody in need, we would send the medal and the story, and they would always be very thankful. And so during that time at the hospital, we all started wearing the miraculous medal. We always had it on, but unfortunately I was unable. As you mentioned, I was much larger. Being in the hospital, they wouldn't allow me to wear the medal. And so at one point, and I don't know if it was before or after you were there, since I was in a coma, but I was very near death, so I'm sure it was close to that. And my family just felt very strongly that they wanted me to have a happy death. They wanted, me to have the medal on me. And so my aunt talked the nurses into wrapping it around my ankle. That was the only place that they could put it. And it was within 3 and 6 and 9 and 12 hours that all of a sudden, all of my numbers started going up.
Getting better.
Getting better. Yes, getting better, improving. So,
well, and a little history on the miraculous medal, because some of the listeners may not know what it is. So just a little history on that. So the miraculous medal, Mary and I are both Catholic, and the miraculous medal was began or struck, I guess you would say, struck in 1830 by St. Catherine Labouré. And she received a vision from the Virgin Mary herself, came to her in a vision and said she wanted her to strike this medal, and gave her the vision of what it should look like, and gave her the message that if people wore this, especially around their neck, they would receive great graces and blessings. And this was in 1830, and I think the medals finally came out like in 1832, and it was in Paris. And almost immediately, when people started wearing this medal, they received miraculous graces, blessings, and it spread very quickly. And the name of the medal was the Medal of the Immaculate Conception, but the nickname then became the Miraculous Medal because there were so many, graces and blessings and miraculous things that happened with people who wore the medal. So it's, been an important, or, one of the things that people who are Catholic might have a devotion to the miraculous medal, or, as you did, you have a devotion to the Blessed Mother. You always have, and you've worn that miraculous medal. And really the message of the miraculous medal, it's not supposed to be worn as a talisman or a good luck charm. It really is trust in the power of prayer. And that's the main message of it. And so that night when you were so sick, I almost felt like that was the message that I was supposed to give your family against all odds. Here you were so sick. My doctor self would have said, never give them hope. But that was the message. Give them hope, tell them these stories, and hopefully that trust in the power of prayer. And actually, you said about your family wanting to put that medal back on you. It was the next morning, because your sister told me after, or, called me and told me when you were getting better, that your mother and aunt the next morning came in to the hospital, and they both looked at each other and said, we have to get that medal back on her. And so they asked the nurses, where can we put it? And they decided to put it on your ankle. And then that's when, like you say, within hours.
Within hours.
You were, somebody who went to, like I say, on the brink of death, to you were healing. And you had like 3 near-death experiences while you were in that coma. How long were you in the coma?
I was in the coma nearly 2 weeks. I believe it was 12 days.
Okay. So tell us, because those were some neat experiences that you've told me about. So
yes.
Tell us about what happened with.
So immediately, the last thing I remember being conscious before they put me in an induced coma was our priest came and gave me the last rites. And I do want to say that when he did that, I had just an incredible sense of peace wash over me at that time. And I just immediately felt so at peace. But throughout my coma, I would have different forms of consciousness, I suppose. And at one point, I remember there was a very young person leading me. And I kept thinking, boy, this person is so young. I can't believe they're in charge of me. They're taking care of me. It was strange. And then later I realized that I'm sure that was my guardian angel. But we were to go to a very large party. We were getting ready to go to a party, and the angel was leading me, and all of a sudden we got to the door and they said, well, we're not allowed in. We have to wait here. And so I was in a period of waiting.
And I remember you've told me this story before, that you said that you just had a tremendous sense of joy. You wanted to go to this
I wanted to go to the party. I was so disappointed I wasn't able to go.
Yeah.
Right. I was disappointed. I had to wait.
So do you think about that? Like, was that the door to,
the next
heaven?
life?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think, is that how you, obviously.
Looking back, that's how I feel about it now. At the time, I just knew it was a party and I wanted to go. Everybody was getting ready and we were going to a party. It felt like we were all on, there were other people surrounding me. I remember the young child angel saying, we're waiting for some soldiers. And I never understood that. But yes, I absolutely believe we were waiting to go on.
And I've thought about that too many times when you said, because you've told me that before, about this, we're waiting for the soldiers. And you did have some soldiers.
We did have soldiers. I had prayer warriors for sure.
So tell us a little bit about that, and we'll get back to the other.
Yes.
The other.
Well, I was very blessed to have so many friends, and devoted friends. Our kids went to Catholic school. And they held 2 large rosaries for me. One of the mothers at the school was also in charge of all the nurses. And so I know she knew too that I was critically ill. And I think that she helped manifest the rosaries for me as well. And then it just went out throughout the community. I was on prayer lists, etc. All of our friends from college, everyone was praying for my recovery. So I feel like I was very much lifted in prayer.
So you had lots of prayer warriors.
Yes, lots of prayer warriors.
So then you had another kind of near-death experience in that coma as well.
At the time I was coming out of the coma.
Okay.
Is that what?
Yeah.
Yes. So I was coming out of the coma and I was awake. And when I woke up, when you're in a coma, there's times you can sense that people are in the room around you. You actually feel that. So I feel like you can hear things.
Was this workers or spiritual?
No, I think these are the people in my room.
Okay, so
actually,
you're kind of
because they, I think you're kind of coming in and out of consciousness. So I always want to tell people, be sure you're giving gifts of, positive reinforcement to patients, because I think that they can actually still hear you. I don't know if that's true from your medical knowledge of the gift of hearing.
They say that's the last sense that you lose.
And so I could hear some things going on. I couldn't always understand what was going on, but I might hear some things. But as they were bringing me out of my coma, and I had been locked in that hospital room, in the ICU for so long, and just this incredible fresh air just washed over me, and I could smell it, and I could feel it rush across my face, and I know it was the Holy Spirit, as I was coming, and all of a sudden I could see light, and it was such a bright light. It was beautiful, and just very healing, and then I just woke up. So.
And that's a lot of people, when they have these near-death experiences, they often describe a light and say that it's very bright but doesn't hurt their eyes.
No,
and they have a feeling of peace and
warmth. And when I woke up from my coma, I know I was still very sick. I had a big battle in front of me, but I was totally at peace, and whatever was going to happen, I knew.
And tell the audience what your doctor said to you later, because I remember that too, that the doctor...
Well, the doctor had been a hardened ICU doctor, and he just looked at me when I was in... People would come... The other thing is there would be... I think it spread throughout the hospital, because I would have nurses and... I don't know, pharmacy, but just anybody would kind of come into my room. They wanted to see me because they had heard I shouldn't be alive, and so there were a lot of people that would want to come in. But my doctor did look at me at our last appointment, and he said, I want you to know you are a miracle. I've never seen a recovery like this before. So. And
they never did find the cause of this serious infection.
No.
I remember that your family was saying they had done all kinds of blood cultures and all kinds of things trying to figure out what was causing this, because it's hard to fight something that you don't even know what the person is sick with.
Right. I think they switch the antibiotics so often, just trying to find something that would work.
Yeah. And so the fact that you recovered and they didn't even know what they were treating, and we're just kind of doing shots in the dark, so to speak. And yet you have this truly miraculous
recovery.
Healing. Yes. So how long then, you were in the ICU, you said nearly 2 weeks. And then how long did you stay in the hospital? And then did you have to go to rehabilitation or?
Yes. And then I was in the hospital for another 2 weeks, and then they moved me down to rehab, and I was there for probably 3 more weeks.
So it was not an easy thing to recover from.
No.
But you've had...
I came home on a walker. I had to learn.
And you were young at the time.
Yes, I had to learn to walk, to sit, to feed myself. They had thought I'd had a stroke at some point because of my blood pressure. So I had to learn to drive, just everything all over again. So.
And you have had a complete recovery.
Yes.
So you have a special picture that you showed me after you recovered, and it's you have this beautiful family, and you took a special trip to Washington, D.C. And just tell us a little bit about where you went and why that was so special.
Yes, we went to for Sunday Mass. We went to the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. It's an incredibly beautiful church in Washington, D.C. And we celebrated Mass together, and then we went to explore. There's a lot of catacombs below the church. And one of the side altars was a large replica of the Miraculous Medal. And so, my kids all have a strong devotion to, and we just knew we had to get a family picture right there in front of that. So it was just such a special trip all around, and that was really the icing on the cake.
Yeah. And you still, to this day, wear, is it the same Miraculous Medal that you
the same Miraculous
always
Medal.
worn? And
Yes.
so very special.
Yes.
And your grandmother, do you know how many medals that your family has given out based?
I don't know the exact number, but I would say it's at least 200 or more.
Wow. And you gave them to people who you said you felt were in need of those? Or
Exactly.
people who asked? And
people would ask, or if we heard that somebody was needing prayers, then we would send that, of course. So.
This is kind of jumping way ahead, but your oldest child, your daughter Catherine, at the time was in the 6th grade when you were so
grade.
ill?
Yes.
Okay. And now Catherine is an ICU nurse.
Yes, she is.
And she is now, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes. She's one of the heroes. She's on the front lines, yes. Taking care of people that were, as sick as you.
Yes.
In very similar circumstances, really.
Yes.
I mean, because obviously, the coronavirus, COVID-19, some of those people are very, very ill, as you were.
Yes.
Very similar. So do you think that your illness was part of the inspiration for her to become a nurse?
Absolutely, without a doubt. That was a big inspiration for her to become a nurse. And then, yes, she does treat patients. She was on the COVID floor, not consistently, but quite a bit.
And she's just a very spiritual, prayerful young lady. And you shared a neat story with me that, here these nurses, ICU nurses, would be caring for these critically ill patients all day. And it's very stressful. It's a stressful job that they do. And at the end of their shift, they would get together and pray.
And pray, yes.
Yeah. So I think to me, that's just so encouraging that there's, these young professionals understand the power of prayer. And at the end of their shift, they get together in the hallway and pray for their patients. So
yes.
I was very moved by that
yes.
when you told me that. So
yes.
It's a wonderful story. So, well, anything else you would like to add about your story, or you want the listeners to know? Or maybe is there anything that you would like to tell? Because right now there is a lot of families, who have people who are as sick as you.
Yes. The only other thing I would say is, I guess they did diagnose me with sepsis. I believe that we talked about that. It is, if you look that up, it's very rare that you are a sepsis survivor. So once I tell anyone I am a sepsis survivor, that's in medical field. They are very, very interested to know my entire story. Many sepsis, if you do survive, you do not have a limb or what have you. So it is truly a miracle that I'm here today and in such good health. So
well,
thanks be to God.
Of course.
So.
And I'll just throw this at the end here, but I was thinking the other day, reading some, scripture about when Jesus walked the face of the earth. It was like he went into this town and he healed and healed and healed, and all these people were healed. And I caught myself thinking, gosh, I wish that these healings could happen today, but really they are.
They do. They do.
And you are a perfect example of that. And there's many, many out there. And sometimes, we just need to ask for that healing.
Yes. And thank you for providing this opportunity for people to learn that they do happen.
That there is miraculous healings. Yes. And we do need to trust in the power of prayer. And prayer does work.
Yes.
I've seen that many times. So, well, thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you, Ginnelle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for watching Take a Deep Breath with us. If you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe, and share below. For more episodes or to purchase my book, visit takeadeepbreathwithus.com. Thank you again, and please remember, no matter what you're going through, you can always take a deep breath, because truly, He holds us all in the palm of his hand.